Story outline: The Shattered Blades Promise Part 1. The Crimson Arena, 1200 words. Characters: Yarek Voss, a salvage pilot captured during a routine mission Niena Shadomir, a noblewoman from the Valdris. Empire forced into gladiatorial combat. Setting: The brutal fighting pits of Zathorn Station Part 2. Chains of Fate, 1200 words. Characters: Same leads exploration of the ancient Valdris Blood Oath tradition, their escape through the station's underbelly, growing understanding amid cultural. Clash Part 3. Into the Void, 1200 words. Characters: Same leads. Journey through hostile territory survival challenges bond them closer. Revelation of Niena's past and why she was condemned Part 4. Breaking chains. Building bridges, 1200 words. Characters: Same leads. Physical chain breaks, but emotional bonds deepen. A crisis forces them to choose between freedom and each other. First acknowledgement of romantic feelings, Part 5. The Hearts Chosen, 1200 words. Characters: Same leads. Confrontation with those who condemned Niena Yarek's choice to honor the blood oath beyond duty. Resolution where love transcends ancient law. Part 1. The Crimson Arena, the metal tang of blood mixed with sand as Yarek Voss spat, his vision swimming back into focus. His head throbbed where something had struck him, a rifle butt, maybe, or a stun baton, and the last thing he remembered was his salvage ship's alarms screaming as pirates boarded. Now he knelt on scorching red sand, wrists bound in heavy irons, while twin purple suns beat down mercilessly. Move, scavenger! A boot connected with his ribs, and Yarek gasped, forcing himself to his knees. The world tilted dangerously before stabilizing into a nightmare. He was in an arena. Not just any arena, a massive amphitheater carved from black. Volcanic stone, its walls rising 30 meters high and crowned with wicked spikes. The stands were packed with thousands of alien spectators whose excited chittering and roaring created a sound like wind through a canyon. Yarek had seen plenty of strange sights in his years piloting salvage runs through the frontier sectors, but nothing had prepared him for this. Around him on the blood-darkened sand stood a dozen other captives, their faces masks of terror. Some were human like him, others were species he recognized from trading posts. A krell with its forearms hanging limp, a fashion whose normally vibrant scales had gone pale with fear. All wore the same heavy chains. All stood on ground stained dark by those who died here before. What is this? Yarek croaked to the nearest guard, a hulking creature with gray hide and tusks. The guard's laugh was a wet, ugly sound. Entertainment, human. You fight, maybe you live another day. You die, the crowd enjoys. Simple. Before Yarek could respond, a horn bellowed across the arena, deep, resonant, final. The crowd's noise reached a fever pitch. Across the sand, a massive gate groaned open, and from its darkness emerged a group of fighters. These weren't prisoners. They were gladiators, their bodies marked with scars and tattoos, their weapons well-worn and deadly. This was execution dressed as sport. Yarek's heart hammered against his ribs as he searched frantically for anything he could use as a weapon. His eyes swept across the arena floor, fragments of broken weapons from previous fights. Scattered bones, nothing within reach. The gladiators advanced with practiced ease, spreading out to cut off any escape. That's when he saw her. She stood, apart from the other prisoners, smaller than most, with skin the color of deep twilight, shot through with silver veins that caught the harsh sunlight. Her hair fell in midnight waves past her shoulders, and despite her obvious injuries, she favored her left. Leg badly, she held herself with a dignity that seemed out of place in this hellish arena. In her hands, she clutched a long spear, its shaft cracked and splintering, barely holding together. She was trying to back away from 3 gladiators, who had marked her as easy prey, her face set in lines of desperate determination. Everything about her posture screamed nobility, not warrior. She didn't belong here any more than Yarek did. The lead gladiator, a massive reptilian creature with scarlet scales, swung a crude but effective mace. The woman raised her damaged spear to block, and the impact shattered the weapon completely. Wooden splinters scattered across the sand as she fell backward, now defenseless, her eyes wide with the knowledge of her impending death. Something inside Yarek snapped. Maybe it was the injustice of it all, or the memory of his sister, who'd had that same look of fierce dignity, even in her final moments. Maybe it was simply that he couldn't stand by and watch someone die when he could do something about it. Without thinking, without planning, he ran. His chains rattled and dragged as he sprinted across the arena floor. The crowd's roar changed pitch surprise, rippling through thousands of alien throats. Yarek dove for the largest fragment of the broken spear, his fingers closing around its splintered shaft as he rolled back to his feet between the woman and her attackers. "Back off!" he shouted, though he had no idea if they understood him. The reptilian gladiator's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with annoyance. It swung its mace in a brutal arc. Yarek ducked under the blow, feeling the wind of its passage ruffle his hair, and jabbed with the broken spear. The jagged end caught the creature across its scaled chest, drawing a line of dark blood. What followed was chaos. Yarek had no formal training, just instinct and the desperate will to survive. He'd been in bar fights, had defended his ship from the occasional boarding attempt, but this was different. These were professional killers, and he was just a salvage pilot with a broken piece of wood. He ducked, weaved, struck when openings appeared. The broken spear became an extension of his arm, jabbing and slashing. A second gladiator, this one, with 4 arms wielding paired blades, came at him from the side. Yarek spun, using his chains as much as his improvised weapon, managing to tangle 2 of those arms, long enough to drive the spear point into the creature's midsection. Pain exploded in his side as a glancing blow caught him, but adrenaline kept him moving. Blood, his own and others, spattered across the sand. Every muscle screamed, his lungs burned, but he couldn't stop. Behind him, he heard the woman struggling to her feet. The reptilian gladiator came at him again, and this time Yarek was ready. He feinted left, then drove the jagged spear up under the creature's guard. It penetrated with sickening resistance, and the light faded from those predatory eyes as the last attacker fell. Yarek staggered backward. The crowd had gone eerily silent. He turned to the woman. Their eyes meeting hers were an impossible violet with flecks of silver, and then his legs gave out. He collapsed beside her, the broken spear falling from his numb fingers. Guards approached cautiously, weapons raised. Yarek braced himself for death, too exhausted to care anymore. But the woman moved with surprising speed, despite her injuries, placing herself between him and the guards. She gripped the broken spear shaft that lay between them. "Katharum," she shouted, her voice cracking but firm. The guards stopped, exchanging uncertain glances. One stepped forward, speaking in a melodic alien language that rose and fell like music. The woman responded, her voice growing stronger with each word, her finger jabbing toward Yarek. Finally, the lead guard switched, accented trade common. "You claim blood oath with this human? This outsider who knows nothing of Valdus law?" "He took up my broken spear," she replied, also in trade common now. "He shed blood for my protection when I could not stand. The ancient law is absolute, regardless of his ignorance." The guard spat on the blood-soaked sand. The blood oath was never meant for lesser species. "The law makes no distinction," she countered, her violet eyes blazing. "It speaks only of the broken spear and the one who raises it." She turned too. Yarek, and he saw fear and anger warring in her expression. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked quietly. Yarek stared back, his head still spinning. I saw someone about to die. I stopped it. You've bound your fate to mine, she said bitterly. By taking up my broken weapon, by standing in my defense, you have invoked the most sacred law of the Valdris Empire. Where I go, you must follow. What befalls me befalls you. Our lives are no longer our own. I don't understand. You will, she interrupted as more guards approached. You may come to wish you'd let me die. A commander in ornate armor surveyed the scene with obvious distaste. Both to the holding cells. The High Council will determine if this irregularity stands under our law. As they were hauled roughly to their feet, the woman's eyes never left Yarek's face. My name is Nienna Shadowmere, she said quietly. Since we apparently share a fate now, you should know who condemned you to it. Yarek managed a weak smile, despite everything. Yarek Voss. And for what it's worth, I'd probably do it again. Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or the beginning of respect. You may not feel that way when you learn what awaits us both. The holding cells beneath the arena reeked of fear and old death. The darkness of the holding cells was absolute, broken only by thin strips of bioluminescent fungus growing in the cracks of ancient stone. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, a steady rhythm that marked the passing of unmeasured time. Yarek sat with his back against the cold wall, feeling the weight of the chains that now connected his ankle to Nienna's anema, short length of metal that forced them to remain within a meter of each other. Across the cell, Nienna sat in mirror position, her twilight-colored skin seeming to gather what little light existed and hold it. She hadn't spoken since they'd been thrown in here, and the silence pressed against Yarek like a physical thing. So, he finally said, unable to bear it anymore. This blood oath. You want to explain it to me? Nienna's violet eyes found him in the darkness. It's ancient. Older than the Empire itself, dating back to when my people were scattered tribes fighting for survival on our homeworld. She paused, and he heard her shift position. When a Valdris warrior falls in battle, but their weapon breaks rather than being taken by the enemy, it's considered a sacred sign. The warrior is meant to survive, but they've lost the means to defend themselves or their honor. And someone else can pick up that weapon? The broken spear specifically, she corrected. In our oldest traditions, if another warrior, even from an enemy tribe, took up that broken spear and shed blood to protect the fallen, they became bound, life-bonded. What happens to one affects the other. It's a debt of honor that transcends all other laws. Yarek processed this, his mind working through the implications. But I'm not Valdris. I'm not even from your empire. Which is why the guards were shocked, Nienna replied, and he heard something like bitter amusement in her voice. The law says nothing about species. It speaks only of the spear and the blood. Technically, you've invoked something that the Valdris hold more sacred than even imperial decree. Then why are we in a cell? Because the High Council will debate whether your ignorance of our ways nullifies the oath. And because, she stopped abruptly. Because what? The silence stretched. Then quietly, because I was meant to die in that arena. My family was condemned for treason against the Empire. I am the last of House Shadowmere, and my death was supposed to be the final chapter. You've complicated what was meant to be a simple execution. Yarek leaned forward as much as the chain allowed. What did your family do? We spoke truth to power. Her voice carried old pain. The Valdris Empire has grown corrupt. The games, the arenas, they weren't always like this. Once, they were tests of skill between willing warriors. Now they're tools of oppression, ways to eliminate those who question the Council's authority. My mother was High Scholar of the Imperial Archives. She uncovered evidence that the Council had been embezzling funds meant for the outer colonies, letting entire settlements starve while they built pleasure palaces. And she exposed them? She tried, Nienna's voice hardened. They moved faster. Accused our entire house of fabricating documents, of treason against the throne. My father, my mother, my 2 younger brothers, all executed within a day. I was kept alive only to suffer public death in the arena, a final humiliation for House Shadowmere. Before Yarrick could respond, distant shouting echoed down the corridor. Both of them fell silent, listening. The shouts grew louder, accompanied by the sharp crack of energy weapons discharging. Smoke began to seep under their cell door. What's happening? Yarrick moved to the bars, trying to see. Nienna joined him, their bodies pressed close by necessity. I hear prisoners breaking free. This station has thousands of captives. If enough of them have decided to revolt. An explosion rocked the foundation, sending dust raining from the ceiling. In the chaos, a guard stumbled backward past their cell. Nienna's hand shot through the bars with cobra-like speed, catching him in a chokehold. The guard struggled, but she held firm until he went limp. Quickly, she gasped, her injured leg trembling with effort as she fished the key card from his belt. Before others come. The cell door slid open with a hiss. They emerged into a corridor filled with smoke and confusion. Prisoners fought guards hand to hand, while fire spread from damaged equipment. Emergency lights cast everything in pulsing red. This way, Nienna pulled Yarrick toward a maintenance shaft, moving with surprising knowledge of the station's layout. The upper levels will be sealed, but the old service corridors were built before the current security grid. There's a chance. They crawled through cramped passages choked with dust and debris, the chain between them making every movement a negotiation. Twice they had to backtrack when passages ended in collapse. The sounds of fighting grew more distant, replaced by the groan of stressed metal and the hiss of escaping atmosphere somewhere in the station's depths. Wait, Yarrick whispered, pulling Nienna to a stop. I hear voices ahead. They pressed against the wall as other escaped prisoners approached, a group of 5, arguing about which direction to take. A massive Krell, easily twice Yarrick's size, spotted them first. Well, look here, the Krell rumbled, advancing. The Valdris princess and her pet human. A smaller creature, something with too many joints and a mouth full of needle teeth, circled around behind them. I remember you from the arena, princess. So high and mighty, even covered in blood. Nienna raised her fists, positioning herself back to back with Yarrick, despite the chain hampering them. We don't want trouble. There's enough chaos without us fighting each other. But that's where you're wrong, the Krell said, cracking its massive knuckles. Your people put half of us in here. Your precious empire and its need for blood sport. Maybe we settle some debts before we leave. They attacked as a group. Yarrick ducked under a wild swing, driving his elbow into something soft. Beside him, he felt Nienna move with fluid grace, despite her injury, her movements precise and economical. The chain forced them to coordinate instinctively, each compensating for the other's movements. Yarrick caught a glimpse of her fighting style. It wasn't the brutal efficiency of a warrior, but something more refined. She struck pressure points, redirected force rather than meeting it head-on. A scholar's understanding of anatomy turned into defense. The Krell grabbed Yarrick from behind, lifting him off his feet. The chain pulled taut, jerking Nienna backward. She spun with the momentum, her foot connecting with the Krell's knee in a strike that made it roar and drop Yarrick. Together, they pressed the advantage, moving as one unit until their attackers fled down another corridor. You fight like a dancer, Yarrick gasped, leaning against the wall. My mother believed in comprehensive education, Nienna replied, breathing hard. Philosophy, history, and enough self-defense to survive court politics. She touched her injured leg gingerly, though I never expected to use it quite like this. The tunnel shook violently, and chunks of ceiling began to fall. Move, Yarrick shouted, and they ran through increasingly unstable passages. A section collapsed behind them, cutting off pursuit, but also their way back. They burst into open air on the station's lower landing platform. The night sky spread above them like spilled ink. 3 moons hung at different heights, their combined light painting everything in shades of silver and blue. The air tasted sweet after the smoke and dust, and Yarrick drew it into his lungs gratefully. "We need to get off this platform," Nienna said, scanning their surroundings. "When they realize the extent of the revolt, they'll lock down every exit." They moved along the platform's edge, keeping to shadows. Below them, the station's lights flickered as power systems struggled with damage from the riot. In the distance, Yarrick could see the curved horizon of whatever world this station orbited, a planet of red deserts and purple storms. "There," Nienna pointed to a small transport pod, one of dozens used for moving between station levels. "If I can bypass its security, we might reach the docking base. And then what? Steal a ship?" She gave him a look that was almost a smile. "Do you have a better plan, salvage pilot?" Working together, they managed to pry open the pod's access panel. Nienna's fingers moved with practiced ease through the wiring, and Yarrick found himself watching her profile in the moonlight, the elegant line of her jaw, the concentration in her eyes, the way her silver-veined skin seemed to shimmer. "Stop staring and help me," she said without looking up. "Hold these 2 wires together while I reroute the power." Yarrick did as instructed, and the pod hummed to life. They climbed in, just as alarms began wailing across the station. The pod dropped away from the platform, accelerating toward the docking levels. "You knew exactly where that pod was," Yarrick observed, "and how to hot-wire it. For a scholar's daughter, you have interesting skills." Nienna kept her eyes on the approaching docking bay. "My family may have been planning to leave the Empire before they moved against us. We'd been gathering resources, learning skills that would help us survive in the outer reaches." Her voice softened. Not that it mattered in the end. The pod jolted to a stop at a docking platform. Through the windows, Yarrick could see rows of ships' personal craft, cargo haulers, even a few military vessels. But guards were already responding to the alarms, sealing bay doors and forming checkpoints. "We'll never make it past them," Yarrick said. "No," Nienna agreed. "But we don't need to." She pointed to a maintenance airlock at the far end of the bay. "That leads to the external hull. If we can reach it, we can EVA our way to the salvage sections. The ships there are usually less guarded. EVA? We don't have suits. The station keeps emergency suits near all exterior airlocks. It's Imperial law." She glanced at him. "Trust me?" Yarrick thought about everything that had happened since he woke in that arena, the impossible odds, the blood oath he didn't understand, this woman who was somehow both vulnerable and fierce. "Not like I have much choice, given this chain." This time her smile was real, if brief. "That's the spirit." They moved through the docking bay's shadows, the chain between them forcing a strange intimacy as they pressed close to avoid detection. At one point, a patrol passed within meters, and Nienna pulled Yarrick into an alcove, her body against his, her hand over his mouth to silence his breathing. He could feel her heartbeat, rapid and strong, and smell something like midnight flowers in her hair. When the patrol passed, she pulled away quickly, not meeting his eyes. The airlock. Come on. They found the emergency suits exactly where she'd said, 4 of them hanging in a small alcove. The suits were designed for short-term hull repairs, basic but functional. Yarrick helped Nienna into hers, his fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar fastenings. "You've done this before?" she asked. Different model, but the principle's the same. Salvage work means lots of EVA time. He sealed her helmet, then worked on his own suit. "The chain's going to be a problem in 0G. We'll manage." She opened the airlock, and they stepped into the small chamber. We've managed everything else so far. The outer door opened, and stars filled Yarek's vision. They stepped out onto the station's hull, magnetic boots keeping them anchored. The salvage section was 50 meters away, around the station's curve. The chain floated between them, and they began the careful process of walking across the hull. Halfway there, Yarek's boot lost magnetic grip. He started to drift, and the chain went taut, pulling Nienna off balance. For a heart-stopping moment, they both floated free, the station below them and the infinite void above. "Don't panic," Nienna's voice came through his helmet com. "Use your maneuvering jets." Small bursts. They managed to arrest their spin and reactivate their boots. But not before Yarek got a long look at the planet below vast red deserts, crisscrossed with silver rivers, storm systems larger than continents. Beautiful and deadly. Almost there, Nienna encouraged Dot. They reached the salvage section's airlock and cycled through. Inside, as Nienna had predicted, security was minimal. Most of the ships here were damaged or abandoned, awaiting either repair or scrapping. "There," Yarek pointed to a small courier vessel. "That's a Farstrider class. I've piloted them before. If it has fuel and functional drives." They made their way to the ship, and Yarek felt a surge of hope when its systems responded to his touch. The hatch hissed open, and they scrambled inside, shedding their EVA suits. Yarek slid into the pilot's seat, while Nienna took the co-pilot position, the chain stretching between them. "Can you fly it?" she asked. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease. "Born to." "Hold on." The Farstrider's engines roared to life, and Yarek punched them toward the bay doors. Alarms screamed. Warning lights flashed. The bay doors began to close. "We're not going to make it," Nienna said, gripping her seat. "Watch me." Yarek pushed the engines to maximum, the little ship shuddering with the strain. They shot through the narrowing gap with barely a meter to spare, the Farstrider's hull scraping against metal with a sound like tearing silk. Then they were free, accelerating away from the station into open space. Behind them, pursuit craft began to launch, but Yarek was already plotting a jump to hyperspace. "Where are we going?" Nienna asked. Yarek realized he had no idea. He was a salvage pilot, not a fugitive. And now he was chained to a woman whose entire empire wanted her dead, bound by a law he didn't understand. "Away," he said finally. "We go away, and we figure out the rest as we go." Nienna was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Away works for now." As the stars stretched into lines and the Farstrider jumped into hyperspace, Yarek glanced at the chain still connecting them. They'd escaped the arena, escaped the station, but they were still bound together. And he was beginning to suspect that the physical chain was the least of what connected them. The Farstrider shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Yarek immediately knew something was wrong. Red warning lights cascaded across the console, and the ship's computer announced in a calm, indifferent voice that their fuel cells were critically low. How bad? Nienna leaned forward, studying the readouts with a scholar's eye despite having no pilot training. "Bad enough that we're not jumping again without refueling." Yarek scanned the star charts. "We're in the Ashmark sector, mostly uncolonized. A few mining outposts, lots of asteroid fields." "Perfect place to disappear," Nienna observed, "or die." Yarek pulled up a wider scan. "There, a moon orbiting that gas giant. Looks like it has atmosphere and water. We can set down, assess our situation." The descent was rougher than Yarek would have liked, the Farstrider's damaged hull protesting as they hit atmosphere. They landed in a valley between rust-colored mountains. Near what sensors indicated was a freshwater lake. When Yarek shut down the engines, the sudden silence was deafening. They sat for a moment, the weight of their situation settling over them like the alien moon's gravity. "So," Nienna said quietly, We're fugitives, bound by a chain we can't break, on an unknown moon with no fuel and limited supplies. When you put it like that, it sounds bad. How would you put it? Yarek met her violet eyes and found himself smiling despite everything. We're alive, we're free, and we've got a whole moon to explore. Could be worse. Something in her expression softened. You have an unusual perspective, Yarek Voss. They spent the rest of that day establishing a basic camp. The ship's fabricator was still functional, so they could manufacture simple tools and equipment. Yarek found a medical kit and insisted on properly treating Nienna's leg injury, a deep bruise and strained ligament that she'd been ignoring for days. You should have said something, he chided, carefully wrapping the injury. This could have gotten infected. I've endured worse. But she didn't pull away from his gentle touch. The chain remained a constant presence, forcing them to coordinate every movement. When Yarek went to gather firewood from the strange blue-barked trees near the lake, Nienna had to come with him. When she needed privacy to bathe in the lake, he had to turn his back but stay within the chain's length. That night, they sat by their fire under unfamiliar stars. The gas giant dominated the sky, a swirling mass of emerald and gold that cast an eerie light over the valley. "Tell me about your family," Nienna said suddenly. "The real story, not just the facts." Yarek stared into the flames. He rarely talked about this. "I had a sister, Myra. She was 3 years younger. Brilliant like you, wanted to be a xenobiologist, study life on frontier worlds." He paused, old pain surfacing. "We grew up on a colony world, Targus Prime. Not much there except determination and people trying to build something better." "What happened to her?" "Pirates raided the colony when I was 19. They took anyone who looked useful, strong workers, young women. Mira was 17. His hands clenched. I tried to stop them. Got knocked unconscious from my trouble. By the time I woke up, they were gone. I spent the next 5 years as a salvage pilot, going from system to system, checking every slave market, every pirate haven. Never found her." Nienna's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his own. "That's why you helped me in the arena. I reminded you of her. At first, maybe." Yarek looked at their joined hands, then up at her face, luminous in the firelight. "But you're not her, Nienna. You're something else entirely." She held his gaze, and the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Then she pulled her hand back, the moment broken. "We should sleep. Tomorrow we need to find a way to break this chain." But sleep didn't come easily for either of them. The days that followed developed a rhythm. They explored the moon together, always connected by the chain, learning to move in unconscious synchronization. Yarek taught Nienna basic survival skills, how to set snares for the rabbit-like creatures that lived in the blue forests, how to identify edible plants, how to read weather patterns in alien skies, Dot in return. Nienna taught him about Valdris culture, history, philosophy. She spoke of her homeworld's great libraries, of debates that lasted weeks in the halls of scholarship, of art and music that had evolved over millennia. "You make it sound beautiful," Yarek said one afternoon as they worked on fashioning a better shelter. "Hard to reconcile with the empire that throws people into arenas." "It is beautiful," Nienna replied, sadness coloring her voice. "Or it was. That's what makes its corruption so tragic. We were supposed to be better than this, a civilization built on knowledge and honor. Instead, we became conquerors, oppressors." She hammered a stake into the ground with more force than necessary. "My mother used to say that the greatest tragedy isn't when something evil wins, but when something good becomes evil." That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains, a violent tempest that battered their improved shelter and sent lightning crackling across the sky. They huddled together inside, the chain hardly necessary, as they pressed close for warmth and comfort. Yarek, Nienna's voice was barely audible over the thunder. Do you regret it? Taking up my spear? He thought about it honestly. The arena, the escape, the endless running, being bound to someone from a culture he barely understood. No, he said finally. I've spent 5 years searching for my sister, trying to undo one moment when I couldn't save someone. Maybe I couldn't save Myra, but I could save you. That means something, even if it cost you your freedom? Freedom's overrated when you're alone. He shifted to look at her in the dim light. Besides, being chained to you isn't exactly a hardship. Her laugh was soft, surprised. You're either very brave or very foolish. Can't it be both? The storm raged on, but inside their shelter, something else was building, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or shared body heat. Nienna's hand found his again, and this time neither of them pulled away. On their 10th day on the moon, disaster struck differently than expected. They were exploring a cave system near the lake when the ground gave way beneath them. Yarek fell first, pulling Nienna with him through the collapsing floor. They tumbled down a slope of loose rocks and dirt, landing hard in an underground cavern. Are you hurt? Yarek gasped when he could breathe again. I don't think so. Nienna sat up gingerly, checking herself. But look. Yarek followed her gaze and froze. The chain between them had caught on a sharp rock during their fall, and one of the links had stretched and bent under their combined weight. It wasn't broken, but it was close, so close that with the right tools and effort, they could finish what the fall had started. They stared at the damaged chain, then at each other. We could be free, Nienna whispered. Actually free. The blood oath requires a physical connection. If we break the chain, you could go home, Yarek finished. Or at least go somewhere you choose. Not be dragged around by a salvage pilot. And you could go back to your life. Find your ship. Return to whatever you were doing before all this. They sat in silence, the weight of possibility heavy between them. The cave around them glittered with some kind of crystalline formation, casting rainbow light across Nienna's face. Finally, Yarek spoke. Do you want that? To be free of me?